Welcome to Women, Men, and Relationships. I'm JJ Flazanes, your host. Thank you for downloading today's show. Quickly, there will be no Q&A episode this week. This will be it for the week. But honestly, this show hits every point. It hits the spirituality, law of attraction. It hits confidence. It hits dating. It hits family and love and nutrition and alternative medicine. And it hits health. And it's really on every level. So it was the only thing I could do was to link love of family with success in business to make this the perfect episode to encompass everything this week. And before I introduce you to Joyce, I do want to let you know that Spirit, Purpose, and Energy is back up on iTunes. iTunes has been cracking down on some fine-tuning of different podcasts, and it took about 3.5 days. So now, of course, they've hit Fit to Love, and that's down. So if you're wanting to recommend the show to anyone, what might be safe is to tell people to go to Spotify or iHeartRadio, or just message me. It won't take long, and pretty soon all my shows will be in tip-top shape and not affected by this crackdown that's been happening on iTunes. Okay, so with that said, Joyce Dales is the president of Buzzagogo and the maker of a product called Cold Be Gone Nasal Swab Remedy. It's a homeopathic Manuka Honey based remedy that you swab in the nose to fight cold, flu, and allergies. Joyce created it to protect her newly adopted daughter after a serious medical crisis left her little girl immunocompromised. Joyce would like to share with us the importance of the nose to our immune system and how you can protect your family using the power of honey. Welcome to the show, Joyce.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Well, I am intrigued by all of the things that we have to talk about today. First and foremost, I love your product. I got a hold of Cold Be Gone, and I have to say I've been using it for a couple of days, and I think it's amazing. And what I love about it is also the backstory of how it came to be, and then even prior to that, your relationship story. And so I think that there's a lot of ground to cover on many different levels that everyone in my audience is going to benefit from, because from relationships to having a family to having a business and to keeping healthy, I mean, we're really going to kind of cover it all in terms of different techniques, tools, tips, and products, one specific product that you have that can help everybody stay healthy. So I think let's start back in, I know that you went through an adoption process to start your family, but I'm interested in even the story behind the story of your relationship. And I think you told me as we were just discussing this offline, so to speak, before we started recording, is that you met your husband on Match.com. Yes?
I did. And I did that when it was kind of taboo and you didn't tell people stuff like that.
Tell us the story.
All right. So in 2002, I was a school teacher, and I was just teaching the sweat hogs at a high school. I'm running my own little alternative ed program, and I loved working with those kids. And I was just lonesome, and I didn't know how I was going to meet anybody in rural New Hampshire. So my other teacher friends decided that I should log on and find someone online. And up to this point, I had just dated, whatever was available locally, and it wasn't working out for me. I wasn't finding anybody that was my right match. So I went on Match.com, and back then that was there was a very new site, and I made a joke about Star Wars, which is embarrassing to say out loud, but I did it. And he responded, and he made a joke back about how we're both Jedis and the Force is strong with us. And that led to our first date at Barnes & Noble. And a year later, we were married. So I went on Match.com, and I found myself a nerd.
Okay, like right away? Like you didn't have to go through 20 people? It was like the first person you talked to?
No, I kissed plenty of frogs through that process. That took a solid, I would say it was about a year of hit or miss. I kept going off the site and losing faith and then going back on. And I think he was my third in real life date. So it wasn't a lot of frogs, a lot of froggy email exchanges, but he was my third in real life date, and it just worked out.
Okay. Well, so now we're married, and it's like 2004?
We got married in 2003.
Okay.
Yep.
And now what happens next in your relationship?
Well, things happened pretty quickly. My father got sick shortly after this. My father got lung cancer from asbestos that he had worked with in the Korean War on a warship. And so shortly after we got married, my husband telecommutes from the house so he could work from home. So he said, look, I want you to leave your teaching job. We're going to go to Florida and we're going to help take care of your dad. So that was just an amazing gift to me. So in my early 30s and he was in his late 30s, we uprooted our lives and we went to Florida for the winter and became very young snowbirds and started taking care of my dad. And we would go back and forth between New England and Florida. And that just became the pattern of our lives. That's still our lives today. We go back and forth every 5 months down here, 7 months up there. And through the last 15 years, my father has passed away, but his parents also live down here just coincidentally, and they've had health issues. So we've just kept the grandparents involved in our lives and kept that sort of multi-generational dynamic intact in our family for our kids. But anyway, so that first year, that's what we did. We wound up becoming snowbirds to help take care of my dad, and that became a huge part of my life because he was immunocompromised, and every part of my life revolved around that.
Every part of your life revolved around his immunocompromise, meaning like you had to be careful about what he ate or what if you were sick or if anyone else was sick or how how you sterilize things. You mean like that?
Everything. Yeah, just like you said, wash your hands, be careful who comes in the house, nobody can be sick. He would go through ups and downs of being neutropenic, which means his white blood cell count would tank and he would be like the boy in the bubble and we'd have to protect him. And that went on for about 5 years before he passed away. And he had a lot of successful, very vibrant living time during those 5 years, but it did eventually get the best of him. So, but during those 5 years, we had just amazing, wonderful memories spending that time with him. But being a caregiver did shape my future and lead me down this path that I'm on now. And then right after he passed away, we decided to adopt. We decided to start our family because before that, I couldn't really think about that. It was just all encompassing, sort of absorbing situation, taking care of my dad. And then once he passed away, we decided to start our family through adoption. So that began with a domestic adoption hunt, and we tried to work with a couple of birth mothers, but domestic adoption has an enormous failure rate. And at that particular time in that year, we just weren't having any success on that path. So we switched to international adoption and we opened a file with both China and Vietnam. And about a year and a half after my dad passed away, we brought our first little girl home from Vietnam, and her name is Camper.
I see the pictures from behind on your promotional stuff here. So is she the blonde or the brunette?
She is the brunette. My little blondie is from China and she has albinism. So she's my little blonde Chinese girl.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. Okay. And so your little girl from Vietnam, she had some issues.
Yes. In the middle of her adoption process, we got a phone call and they told us that she had pneumonia, maybe. And all of this is through a translator. So everything was sort of not 100% sure. And then about 2-3 days later, we find out she's at a hospital and might have something wrong with her heart. A couple days later, we hear at 3 a.m. through translator, no, she needs emergency open heart surgery. She comes from a region in Vietnam where there's a cluster of children who have a certain type of rare heart defect, and they believe it is associated with Agent Orange. And the moment they told us she needed emergency open heart surgery, within hours, it had been done. And we were told it wouldn't be for a few days. So everything sort of came on like a delay. Like the moment we get one piece of information, the next thing had already moved along. So she had emergency open heart surgery in Vietnam at the Swedish Pediatric Hospital in Hanoi before we ever even met her. And then after that, she had a difficult recovery ahead of her, but she did astoundingly well considering the condition she was in. And we had to make a really difficult decision, like, do we still do this? Do we go? We were getting like really poor information, like half of it we weren't even sure was reality based. And so finally we got approval 3 months after her surgery to go get her. And we said, no matter what, we're going to go see this baby girl. We're going to put our hands on her. She is ours. So we got my brother and we got on a plane and the three of us flew to Vietnam, and we kind of joked that it was like survivor baby. We wound up in a rural part of the country with this little baby girl. The word immunocompromised is being used again. She's been handed to me with this big fresh scar up her chest, and I don't even know what I'm doing. We're running out of diapers, running out of formula, but we made it work. It was magical, because the moment she was handed to me, she was ours.
How old was she when you got her?
She was exactly 1 year old. We landed in Vietnam the day Barack Obama was elected, and it was her birthday. She turned 1. So we got her, I think it was 4 days after her first birthday. I know.
So you have this little baby.
She's so little.
And were you part of her recovery after you picked her up, or was it her recovery happening before you got there?
Her recovery was happening before we got there, but I mean, the conditions, without getting into too many details, she was in some pretty tough conditions for somebody that's recovering from what she was recovering from. And so I was really eager to get her home. I remember being in Hanoi and rushing to this SOS clinic because she had a bad cough. And we had been told she was going to get all these meds, and we were given nothing. So, but the moment I got back to Hanoi, which is 4 days after she was handed to me, we rushed to this SOS clinic, and this amazing Australian doctor with this amazing accent, big, tall, blonde man, he examined her from head to toe, and he could tell how worried I was. And he grabbed my arm and he said, "Get her home. She's fantastic. Get her home." And that was it. We got on a plane, zoomed to the US. She was amazing. It was like nothing had ever happened to her. You would not have known that there was something wrong with this baby girl or what she had survived. So then once we got home to Boston, she went to Boston Children's Hospital, and they had the same reaction. They scrutinized her from head to toe, just really expecting to give us tough news or to be cautionary. And the only thing they kept saying to us was, "She's immunocompromised. Be careful with her. But she looks amazing." And she was.
She was immunocompromised at the time without anyone saying that it could be strengthened? Or was it this is it forever?
There were so many doctors involved. Like, some doctors were more cautionary than others. Others were like the guy in Hanoi, the Australian guy, were like, "She's amazing. Take her home, feed her well. She's going to be great." And then other doctors were like, no, this is the reality of what she's up against, and you need to be really careful, and you need to make sure she doesn't get sick and keep her away from people. And technically she's medically fragile. Anybody post open heart surgery like that, and she'd had pulmonary hypertension as well. Her lungs were scarred from the delay in her getting her heart defect corrected. So there were several doctors that said to us, "No, you really need to, again, go back to washing your hands. No one can be around her that's sick. Keep her home. Keep her cloistered." All of those practices. And I took that very seriously, even though when I'd look at her, I'd think, "She's great. She's amazing. Look at how hardy this little peanut is." Like, I still protected her and took their warnings very, very seriously.
And how did she respond? Did she do well, or did she get sick?
She fattened up so fast. We went from this tiny little 15-pound peanut whose breathing rate was 68 breaths per minute in her sleep, which is a reason to go to the ER. Within 3 days of getting the proper nutrition and care and love, her breathing rate was down into the 30s. And I was practicing attachment parenting with her and just putting as much love and positive energy into this child as I could. And within weeks, she fattened up, was sleeping through the night. Her breathing rate restored to just above what's considered normal, which is appropriate for her recovery. And she was off to the races, crawling. She started crawling within 4 days of meeting us, and she hadn't been prior to that. So her catch up was fast and furious.
So it sounds like she was doing really well. Was there ever a point in which she backslid?
No, I'm very happy to say that while we were scared all the time, we were new parents. A child had just had open heart surgery. Half of the doctors are telling us to be afraid and to protect her, and we took that to heart and did it vigorously. But then what she was doing in front of our eyes was just a testament to how strong she is as a little person. So I have to give her and her spirit all the credit.
Well, it's, you can plant a seed in multiple different environments and they're not all going to grow the same or at all. So there is something to be said about the environment, the attached parenting, sort of the hopefulness, the positivity that you did give her, but she does have a role in that. So link me to how that started to affect and change what you were doing in the world, in your career, because you had given up being a teacher to take care of your father. Your husband's now supporting you. So what happened next for you?
Well, when we had her home, within, I'd say, the first year when we were told, she's immunocompromised, and I understood the significance of that potentially, and I sort of lived this in a cautionary, sort of like very cautious way. And I began to employ all the things that we had been taught. But one of the things that bothered me is I'm looking at this little girl, and I'm impressed and amazed and just joyful about her recovery and how well she's doing. But I'm also afraid. I'm afraid of, her lungs are scarred. Her body is healing. And I remember feeling so afraid with my father and his being immunocompromised and his neutropenia, just afraid of anybody with a sniffle near us. And I hated that feeling. And so when I became a mom, I decided to no longer be afraid of that. That annoyed me. I was just so done with that. And this is my baby, and I'm going to protect her. So I started to research, how do we catch a cold? I was sick to death of being afraid of being sick. It just wasn't going to be part of my world anymore. I had to understand it. I mean, here, common cold is part of our, as old as the earth here. So it can't be unsolvable. I took it from that sort of very stubborn approach. So I began to research how we catch a cold, and I began to research the nasal biome and its involvement in how we catch a cold. And I was amazed at what I learned. I became obsessive about it. Now, I should preface this by saying I've been a honeybee enthusiast and apitherapy enthusiast all my life. I love honeybees. I love the potential there. And I had already done a bunch of research about super honeys in particular, because Jeffrey, when he was in college, had gotten a hospital-acquired MRSA just before I met him. And on our first date, he told me that a year prior to that first date, he had been in the hospital afraid he was going to lose his ability to walk or lose his life, because he had to have 11 surgeries for a hospital-acquired MRSA, and he lost the bottom part of his tailbone and had to have skin grafting, and it was life-threatening. So I took all of my apitherapy knowledge and everything I had learned after Jeffrey's infection about super honeys in particular and their ability to combat hospital-acquired infections, and I started to kind of put two and two together about how I could protect Miss Camper, or anyone I loved that was sick, and how to protect myself. So what I learned was that it's actually kind of hard to catch a cold or flu through the air unless somebody sneezes directly beside you, right next to your face, and you inhale dramatically, or like if a toddler sneezes directly into your mouth, which I learned as a mom pretty much happens every week. And yeah, so the gross parts of motherhood. So what I learned was we catch colds. Basically, our hands are always infected with something. And when we touch our eyes, ears, nose, or mouth, the germ or the bug, whatever it is, will travel to the upper nasal passages, to the adenoid zone, where it will latch on. And depending on the variety of germ, it'll sit there dormant from 1 to 7 days. And then at some point, it will pass its code onto your cells, and then your cells will replicate that code millions of times over within hours. And that's when you'll feel like the tickle, whatever your signal is, because everybody kind of has their own signal that they're catching something. And that is how we catch a cold. It's actually pretty straightforward. If you touch any opening above the neck, that germ is going straight to the adenoid zone. It's going to sit there and wait to replicate. And that fascinated me. And I thought, what can I do about that? And that's when I began to percolate on the idea of creating my little cold remedy and marrying the idea of how we can attack it from the nasal passages with apitherapy, with super honeys.
Joyce, what's your birthday?
It's June 5th, 1972.
Well, I didn't need the year, but June 5th. Okay, so you're a Gemini. Okay. Yep, just a whole, I was just curious about your astrological energy, and the ideas and the creation is very alive. That makes sense for the Gemini. Geminis get very excited about creating things. Good on you to finish it. I know a lot of Geminis, part of the Gemini aspect is getting excited, but they don't necessarily complete all projects. So the fact that you've completed yours is outstanding. I'm sure there's other things in your chart that support that, but so
I think my Libra husband, he supports that.
Okay, good. Well, you probably have something in your moon, which is your emotions, and something in your Mercury, which is communication, and possibly your rising sign. Anyway, there's a whole chart there that kind of, again, it's that, to me, it's like the ingredient list of your makeup and all the different flavors that provides in your personality and how you interpret information and all that kind of stuff. But I definitely can appreciate the positivity and the passion and the idea creation and the, figuring things out. So you now are dealing with the nasal biome, which, I don't know if you've listened to my show before.
Yes, I love stuff about the gut biome. I'm obsessed with it. And that's what led to my research about the nasal biome and then putting it all together like a riddle.
Yeah, I've done a show on probiotics, and we've done a couple different shows, not in the extensiveness of each section of the, of our digestion and the way that we have, as prebiotics and probiotics and good gut bacteria, or bacteria in general, all up and down our digestive tract from our nose to our anus. And each different section has different kinds of bacteria. And so to talk about just the nasal biome is just fascinating. I wouldn't have thought. Well, I mean, I do know there are some products, or there have been some products in the market, some of which that have had both a negative and a positive response by people that are even in a more natural section of the grocery store. But people are saying that while it works, some people say that it's dangerous. So all of a sudden, this is the first product that I've ever tried that is, I would say, you take it another step further in incorporating both homeopathic remedies, but the whole honey thing, like as I'm putting it on the swab. So let's everyone's like, what are you talking about? So before I get into that, let's start talking about how you've created this product.
Okay. So I had my apitherapy component. I had my drive as a mom, which is probably why my Gemini, I saw it through, because when, I was motivated. I had my apitherapy. I had my super honeys. I understood how a cold happens. I was diving into the biology of cold and flu and allergy symptoms and where they begin. Then I dove into the nasal biome, and I was blown away to learn that while your gut is your restore and maintain zone, your nose is trap and prevent, and we have boogers for a reason. And our nose is loaded with lactobacillus all the way up through the sinus cavity. We have this amazing biodiversity. And for it to be sort of the starting point for 95% of all infections, it needs to have biodiversity. It needs to be healthy, moist, and not be compromised. And by the time we hit 40, we have compromised most of our biome, our skin biome, our gut biome, and our nasal biome, which that is the first line of defense in fighting most illnesses, most communicable illnesses. I mean, for instance, meningitis sits in your nose for 7 days before it does a thing. And if you have a healthy biome, it can really impact whether or not your immune system gets overwhelmed or can get ahead of something. And it's also a critical factor in co-infection, which a lot of people don't realize. When you hear of people being swabbed in their noses for influenza A or B, if they become hospitalized or truly overwhelmed by the illness, there's usually a secondary infection in there. There's a strep or another strain. So your biome needs to be in complete fighting form in order for the antibiotics to work, if you have to go on antibiotics, or for your body to get ahead of an infection and to speed up healing. So when I learned that, combined with how we catch a cold with our hands, those two things together, it was like mind blown. Because I'd spent so much time just thinking about my gut biome and how that relates to my immune status and my health overall. I had never thought about how critical the nasal biome is. So that's why when I began to put my little formula together, I wanted to think about that. I wanted to address that. And it went back to my apitherapy roots. Super honey is probiotic, it's prebiotic, and it's a humectant. It will serve the nasal biome in every possible way. So that is when I turned into a mad scientist in my kitchen, and I began to create insane recipes and keep them in mason jars and insist that everybody I know shove this up their nose. And that led to eventually, after 3 years, led to my formulation.
Apitherapy is not a common term that most people know of, and it's the use of products derived from bees, right? So in alternative medicine, and that also includes, besides honey, venom, pollen, and royal jelly. How did you even get into that?
Well, you know how if you like hippopotamuses, everybody gives you something that's a hippo? Well, since I was a little girl, I'm obsessed with bumblebees. I'm chasing them down. I just love bees. And then that turned into a love of honey. And then that turned into researching honey and always wanting to be a beekeeper. And then my husband's MRSA infection took me down the medicinal path of what honey could potentially do for us biologically.
Okay, well, that's very cool. Now, I have to ask, have you played with the other aspects of things from bees like royal jelly? Because I know there's a lot of benefit to royal jelly too.
My cabinet is full. It is full of everything you can, propolis, Brazilian red, Highland heather honey, like all the super honeys in the world, Twalang honey. I'm obsessed. Did you know Twalang honey, while it is very expensive and very rare and from the Pacific Rim, if you eat Twalang honey, there are many, many studies that say it really affects your hormones. It can rebalance your hormones. So if you're perimenopausal or miserable in some way with regards to your hormones, it can help balance them back out just by eating Twalang honey.
Okay, so we're gonna do another show all
Okay.
about honey. Okay.
I'm obsessed.
Honey and royal jelly, because I think that's super fascinating. Okay, so we're going to do another show about that. Let's get back to this amazing product, which includes Manuka honey. And
Manuka.
so let's not mention any other honeys, but
Okay.
I want to, okay, so you're making this product, which I'm
Yes.
fascinated with, because I started to make something as well, although I copied it from someone else that stopped doing it and tried to make it a little bit better. You're doing this with this proactive idea that I want to keep my family healthy. I want everybody's immune system. Plus, you love bees, and so it's this perfect storm of I'm going to make this product and stick it up my nose. So let's go over some of the things, some of the feedback that you got when you initially did it. And did you have the idea to sell it? I mean, did you do it just for yourself, or did you think I'm going to make this into something I'm going to sell?
It was just for me. I mean, I was keeping it in jars in the fridge because early on I was adding a lot of water. Well, I should back up. When I started doing the formulation, and I knew you had just said Manuka honey. Manuka honey is one of the super honeys we use in the blend, and it's the one I talk about. The rest I don't give away my recipe, but Manuka honey is one that people are starting to become aware of. And at that time, Manuka honey was just on the scene. It was the new kid on the scene, and people were just becoming aware of it. And there's a guy named Dr. Peter Mullen. He's the father of Manuka honey out of Waikato University in New Zealand. And he's the one that discovered the UMF, the unique Manuka factor. And it was this amazing property of Manuka honey that is something about the bee's enzymatic activity, the bee spit basically reacting with the tree, creating something called methylglyoxal. And it has to be measured in order for the Manuka to be rated as having a particular UMF. And so being the kind of person, I guess, being a Gemini and just taking everything into my own hands and not having any fear whatsoever, or not refusing to take no for an answer, I emailed Dr. Peter Mullen and I started to work with him, and we had a year-long email exchange. And I would shoot my ideas out to him, and he would give me feedback, and he helped me come up with my formulation. And what I learned was that Manuka honey, and it's funny that you said the nose to the anus, because one of the things I joked with Dr. Mullen about was Manuka honey is one of the few honeys in the world that can survive the trip from the rooter to the tutor and still maintain its medicinal value. Most honeys have UPF, which is peroxide activity, which is great if you have a cut or something, but your own body's acids will neutralize it pretty quickly, so its medicinal value is limited. It's still got lots of medicinal value, but it is limited in time and in distance throughout the body. And Manuka can go the entire journey. For instance, Manuka can kill E. coli or H. pylori in your gut if you suffer from ulcers, and that's amazing to me. So I worked with him on my formulation, and at first it was just in the fridge, handing it out to friends and family. But the feedback I would get was, I had a cold for one day, or I thought I was getting a cold and now it's gone, or I'm the only one in my house that didn't get it at all, and I'm the one that was shoving the honey up my nose. after about a year to 2 years of that, I can't quite remember, my husband and a couple of my cousins were like, you need to sell this. You need to sell it. And I had no idea what that meant. I thought I would stick it in jars and go sit at a farmer's market and sell my remedy. And over the course of the next 3 years, and because my husband is brilliant and I have to give him all the credit in the world, he used his law degree. He used to be an environmental lawyer. And we discovered that in order for me to sell, in order for me to call it Cold Be Gone, I needed to become an OTC homeopathic over-the-counter remedy, a true pharmaceutical. And if I had known what that meant or what that entailed back then, I'm not sure I would be where I am today. I think I would have quit and run away because it was years of getting lawyers and jumping through all the hoops and making sure everything right down to the font size is correct and active, inactive ingredients and box, everything is regulated. Shelf stability testing, finding the right factory, all of that was, if I had known back then, I think I would have become overwhelmed. But I'm very glad I didn't, and that's what brought me to being able to sell it today.
I had a product that I was going to make. I still might in the future. It's going to be put on hold because it wasn't working out, kind of like what you just, like all the things that you said that you learned that you had to do. I am aware of some of those things, but I know that there are more to come. But I've recently sort of been working with a medical intuitive and muscle tested some of the stuff, and some of the ingredients aren't good for me right now. So I think that's the other reason why it hasn't worked out. But the whole bringing a product to market, especially with the way that you have. So what would you say was the whole duration from the idea and getting started of making, you had the formula, it's past the formula. How long did it take to actually get it on shelves or get it? I know that you're going to be launching 3,000 stores, 3,000 CVSs next month, and you're on Amazon right now. But to get your first product on Amazon legally, how long did it take?
Oh my gosh. I would say from the invention of the product to being fully FDA compliant was between 3 and 5 years. There were different stages, so it's kind of fuzzy. But being to where we are now, total was 7 years.
Wow. Okay. Good to know.
But it wouldn't take you 7 years because you could just call me up and we'll work through all the problems and I will save you months and years of time.
Oh, thank you. You are one of many contacts I have in the industries to get these things done. Like I said before, I also believe in divine timing. So there's something to be said about that. It's not the right time yet for me, but when it is, I will take you up on that and I will absolutely be in touch with you. So, this product, so when I got it, I guess because I hadn't had the information yet, I didn't realize that it was honey. I'm putting it on the swab and I'm putting it in my nose. Now, I'm not new to preventative homeopathic things up my nose. So, but it was the first time I had put honey up my nose. And I have to say it was kind of cool. We only used it for a couple of days when we were away. Many things have happened. There was a flu a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago now. And I haven't been sick in 10 years like that. And I think there's a spiritual and emotional reason for it as well, because it hit so hard, so fast. There was no warning. And usually I get a warning and I do homeopathic remedies to kick it before it exacerbates, and I usually can catch something ahead of time. But there was that, then the birthday, we were away, and we had elevation sickness, altitude sickness, like the entire week. But that's not contagious. That's just, and then coming back, and then Doug's brother passed, and then we were traveling for that. So that I noticed when I got to Baltimore that he was still coughing. I hadn't been coughing anymore, but he's still coughing. And so when we got back here, and I had the product, he said, I want to try that. So I think within the first day or two that we used it, he stopped coughing. Okay. So let's talk about, he had a symptom, but I see some of your literature here. And I know from what you're talking about in terms of prevention, that you're saying this is a product to not just use when you feel symptoms, correct?
Well, I like to think of it as a sort of a supplement and OTC for active symptoms and to use just for general wellness. I'm not allowed, because of the FDA regulations, to ever say that it's a preventative or that can prevent anything. I can just tell you that people swear by it. I use it for general wellness if I'm afraid I might be getting ready to get sick. And I think it's very beneficial to the nasal biome because it is a prebiotic, probiotic, and helps you restore your moisture. So, for instance, I just got an email from some climbers that went to the top of Kilimanjaro, and I didn't know this because, I don't climb, but they all suffer from altitude sickness, and it really compromises the nasal biome and their breathing, because they dry out. And so any germs they may have acquired in the process of traveling to Kilimanjaro, the moment they hit the mountain in the thin air, they become susceptible to coming down with something. And so they were all sharing Colbicon. It was the most wonderful review I'd ever gotten. I absolutely loved it. So I think that Colbicon can be really beneficial if you are traveling and you feel like you're becoming run down or there's not enough moisture to help your immune system function correctly.
Okay, so it says how to use Cold Be Gone. Use 3 to 4 times a week for general wellness.
Yep.
Use 3 times a day to fight off active illness.
Mm-hmm.
Safe for your whole family over the age of 1. Do not use if be allergic. You also say that April is when flu season has a secondary surge.
It sure does.
Okay, that's good to know. It's March, so I'm going to keep using it. July through August is hand, foot, and mouth season. What does that mean?
Well, that's Coxsackie and enterovirus seed. It's summer colds. So for little kids, it's hand, foot, and mouth, but to a grown-up, it'll present as more of like a summer cold. And the reason I have that on that sheet, believe it or not, is the Red Sox use my product, and they were using it last year because they had an outbreak of hand, foot, and mouth that they'd acquired, I believe, from the Yankees, no less. And so when I was printing that up to send it to you, I had just printed it up for the ball players to remind them of, hey guys, season's starting, and here's what you need to pay attention to. Because they had just last season had a month-long outbreak of hand, foot, and mouth amongst the players' wives and children and players. So that's your summer cold season. And so you're never really in the clear with regards to seasonal illness. We think of cold and flu as this big, 4-month event in the middle of winter, but we have other peaks. The dominant flu strain is what you think of for the height of cold and flu season. But then the secondary, the moment that one begins to wane, the non-dominant strain will have a surge in springtime. So that when you see the next surge in April, that will be the non-dominant strain for this season. And then we'll have our summer cold and flu season, which is July. And then we start right back up with cold and flu season with all the kids going back to school.
Okay, I have 2 questions. The first one is on a marketing side. How did you get it to the ball players? Like, how did they even know about it?
Well, okay, so my dad was a tortured New England Red Sox fan, and I grew up in that house. So as a good Mainer girl, I grew up watching ball games every night. So about 3 years ago, the Red Sox had come off of spring training and were starting the season, and it didn't start well because they all were sick. And I'd heard about it on NECN because I'm married to a rabid Red Sox fan, and I am one myself. So that makes me crazy when I hear of people getting sick, like all of the American Idol contestants last night when I was watching with my daughter. They're all sick. It makes me crazy because I know I can help. So I packed up some Colbicon, I wrote a nice little note, and then I too believe in divine intervention and signs. I went to the Fenway corporate office employee listing, and I just scanned the names. And I came to this one name, Russell Noir. And I looked him up. He was the head massage therapist and one of the physical therapists of the Red Sox. He'd been brought to the team back in 2004, right after my husband and I got married, and they won the World Series in 2004, breaking the curse. And Kurt Schilling had brought him to the team as sort of a alternative medicine guru, and the team absolutely loved him, and they have kept him ever since. He's an institution there now. He's got 5 rings. He's this wonderful Samoan man, older, in his 60s, with a long white ponytail. And the moment I saw his picture, I'm like, he's magic. I love him. He's magic. If anybody will understand my intention, it will be this man. So I wrote him a letter, and I just said, look, I'm just going to donate it to the team. I am not looking for one blessed thing. Just please, I need you guys to just think about it. See if any of the players would be willing to try it. Well, about a month later, nothing ever came of it. It was just one of my crazy whims. I get an email at 1 a.m, the night before Father's Day. And it says, hi, I loved your remedy. I really get the message and the your thinking behind it. I think it's wonderful. Can you please bring 23 bottles to Fenway tomorrow? And we were in New Hampshire at the time. So I wake my husband up at 1 a.m. I was like, honey, look at this email. Do you think this is real? And he sits up and he goes, he's asking for 23 bottles because there's 23 guys on the roster. And for him, that was like validating thing. So the next day for Father's Day, he got to deliver the bottles to Fenway, and it was just an amazing, fun thing. And we didn't really think anything of it, but sure enough, they've asked for it 2 to 3 times every single season since in the last 3 years. I've met several of the players. I've gotten to go on a tour below Fenway and shake the hands of the people that use Colby-Gon. And this year they allowed me to buy a banner at Fenway South down at City of Palms Park. Well, it's JetBlue Stadium now, which is near where we stay in Florida. And I am an official sponsor of the Boston Red Sox now.
Okay, talk about divine timing. This show spans this episode is going to hit all points on spirit, purpose, and energy, nutrition, alternative medicine, women, men, and relationships, because of sort of the unfolding of the, like how easy, like that was so easy. You sent an email, right? And anyway, this is the divine timing of that is perfect. And so there's so many things to get from today's episode. If you haven't already, there's something for everyone, from a business side to a relationship side to a divine timing side to a business side. It's been great. So now I rarely get sick, which is why recently when that happened, there was more to it. I mean, not that if I would have been using Colby-Gon, maybe I wouldn't have. I mean, I had all my immune support with me. I never stopped taking it. There was a little more drinking and probably some foods that weren't normal for me. And I was in some airplanes. So there was definitely more stimulus. And then being with all kinds of people and sick people, lots of sick people in that room. But the fact that my body had received it was something new for me.
I mean, just speaking of spirituality, and that's how I operate in my life. I listen to the inner voice, and you got to get quiet to do it. And for Gemini, that's difficult. So that has come with age. And maybe that's why now at 46 years old, I'm having success as an entrepreneur, because I've learned to get quiet. I've learned to listen to that inner voice. And for me, all medical choices are all about my intuition. And I was very traditional in my medicine leanings and my medical practices for a huge portion of my life. And I take things into consideration, and I do things very differently now at this point in my life.
You have a product and that is in a homeopathic natural sense. And my guess is that your family probably doesn't get sick very much.
No, we don't. We don't. Not anymore. I used to get sick a lot. And it took more than half of my life to figure out why. And probably like you. I mean, I think that the internet and the access to information, that sort of revolution, which they're now trying to shut down, has really impacted my health. And my ability to learn what I need to learn to be a well person.
And I'm sure you're being proactive helps, right? In having your father and now then your daughter, and then now, being able to experiment with all these wonderful different honeys and the homeopathic remedies that go into the Colby-Gon. Let's tell people where to get it and how to find it and how to use it and who needs it the most and how it's beneficial for everybody.
Right. Well, you can get it on Amazon. We're going to have our own store up and running. We just did a big website redesign in anticipation of CVS, because I think the traffic is going to go up tremendously. And you can get it at CVS and many, many local health food stores all over the country. We have a map on our website. You can go and click through and check it out. And I encourage people. I do a lot of wellness talks. Believe it or not, I do a lot of wellness talks in corporate America. I get hired to come in and talk about how to not catch a cold. I get to talk about germs on your hands. But I stick with what I know as a mom. Stop eating with your hands. If somebody sneezes or coughs near you, close your mouth, stay calm, let your nose do its job. That's what it's designed to do. So that's how I address wellness, and that's how I approach it for people that are interested in natural wellness. I encourage people to use their vitamin C, take their probiotics, and basically I view Colby-Gon as just another tool in your tool chest of how to stay well in the winter or any time of year.
Excellent. So is it colbygon.com?
It's colbygon.com and buzzagogo.com. Buzzagogo is my parent company, sort of the bigger company that will hopefully have more products in the future.
Okay, that's B-U-Z-Z, Buzzagogo.
Buzzagogo.
BUZZAGOGO.com.
Yep.
Okay, and the product is called Cold, C-O-L-D, B-E-E, so like a honeybee, Colby-Gon. So if you're looking it up on Amazon, it's a tiny little tube, and you put some on a Q-tip and you stick it in your nose and run around and get those good compounds in your in your nose to help your own, there's prebiotics in there, right? To help your own probiotics build up in your nose and protect you
Right.
from whatever's coming in. It's a cool product. I really like it.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah,
you.
congratulations for everything. It's an amazing story on so many different levels. Like literally Match.com. Like there are people who just from that alone will get excited about hearing that because they have given up hope. They don't think it works. They don't know anyone else who it's worked for necessarily personally. Maybe they've heard stories, but now maybe you get to become someone who they can, look up to and say, oh, well, it worked for her. And look how perfect it is. Look how great their relationship sounds. And they work together and he helped her to quit her job so they can go support her dad and this whole company. And, it just sounds like really great. And
Well,
that's
thank you.
hopeful enough in itself. And before we go, I am just curious, you said you have heard a couple of my shows. Which ones did you hear?
I was listening to the gut biome just the other night when I was on my little walk.
Cool. Well, I
Yeah.
will be sharing this episode with Jeannie Peters, who did that, right?
Yeah.
The nutritionist who is part of my arsenal of prevention and health, and someone who I go to on a regular basis for whatever comes down the pipeline. If I don't have a tool in my toolbox, I definitely refer to her because she's also a very natural-based person, using all kinds of things from growing your own food and using herbs and foods and natural remedies and homeopathics to heal yourself, as well as looking at what we can do to better strengthen our immunity naturally. And she's
Right.
going to be all interested in this. I know she's going to love this episode as well as everyone else who's listening. So Joyce, we're going to do another show on honey because
Awesome.
I don't have one, and I'm interested because I know the healing properties of honey, but I have to say I don't use it as much as I would like to. And I would love to experiment. I know in Chinese medicine and acupuncture, royal jelly has been prescribed to me, and I haven't tried it yet in its like usage and its dosage, how people said you need to use it like this. And I would love to learn more about it and get even more excited. I think the whole point was I needed to wait to meet you so that I could actually really get excited about it and decide that I want to try all of these things because I'm all about healing naturally. So I appreciate it.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.